Our next presenter, next presentation is on Mercy as Decolonial Praxis of Ecclesial Consciousness for the African Church by SimonMary Asese, University of Portland. Welcome, you have 30 minutes. 20 minutes.
Oh, I thought you said 40. Thank you very much. So what is most insightful about how African traditional religion articulates the virtue of mercy is that it is itself a cosmological virtue. The fact that God is conceptualized as mercy itself, who is instantiated in the imagination of adherents of the religion as creator and sustainer of the universe and the human person, speaks to a cosmic turn in its fullness. As Francis Anekwe Oborji notes, and I quote him, "It could also be seen from the way ATRO accentuates the universe with profound religious meaning. There is among the Africans of the traditional religion a certain awareness of hidden power which lies behind the course of nature and the events of human life. There is a presence and strong recognition of a supreme being, or still more, of a father. This deep awareness and recognition results in a way of life that is imbued with a deep religious sense," unquote. It is because of this that when Africans of the traditional religion explain the universe as having been created by God, they are automatically looking at the universe in a religious way. Consequently, creation itself serves as a medium for the enactment of mercy. This becomes more poignant when Africans instantiate rituals of gratitude for good health or abundant harvest. They express gratitude not just to the medium, but to the land from which the herbs of healing come. The same can be said of the deities themselves. By performing their fundamental roles as sustainers of life and cosmic harmony, whether in human relationships or among non-human beings, the deities receive in return the gift of mercy, which is itself ritualized by the sacrificial acts of prayers offered by humans to them. In other words, prayer itself is a ritual of mercy. It instantiates an abundant flow of gratitude and harmony that allows for cosmic order to be felt by all beings, spiritual and material alike. John S. Poby notes this well when he writes about the religious significance of the ritual of libation practiced among the Akan people of Ghana. On another note, a deity that fails to play their role in time of either individual or communal crisis can be punished through the withdrawal of ritual worship or veneration. Such a deity is considered dead. Simply said, in African worldview, a deity can be ritualistically killed by the community. Hence, Robin Horton notes the following among the Kalabari people of southern Nigeria. And I quote him, "Literally, if a spirit's demands become too burdensome, the whole congregation can join together to destroy its cult of objects, and by this unanimous act of rejection render it powerless to trouble them further. Broadly then, the more people lavish offerings, invocations, and festivals upon any spirit, the more powerful it becomes both to reward and punish them. And conversely, the less they attend to it, the less powerful it becomes, up to the point at which unanimous rejection results in the complete loss of power. Generally, of course, a single man cannot reject a spirit at will, for while he is only one among a congregation of many, it will have the power to punish him," unquote. On the killing of deities, Nimiwa Riboko notes the following about the Kalabari people of southern Nigeria. Kalabari aphorism, "If a god becomes too furious or demanding, we will tell it from which wood it was carved." In other words, a community can unanimously annul a god's power by refusing it worship, unquote. It is also important that one stresses the following point again. So, but what I'm trying to say, before I continue, is that even the deities need mercy from the community, not us only who need mercy from them. So The expression of mercy is not just in the acts of the divine towards humans or the material world. Divine beings can also receive explicit acts of mercy and be pardoned for their behaviors, especially when their actions do not reflect the instantiation of abundant life for all. So Robin Horton describes this process of pardoning a deity gone rogue among the Kalabari people. So the worshippers of the deity summoned, he told a story that the worshippers of a deity summoned the deity and put it on trial. It was found guilty and consequently fined. The trial and penalty are an expression of mercy on a deity by the worshiping community. So on a different note, it is important to understand that the human body, as understood in African worldview, is a body that ought to instantiate acts of mercy. We are an embodiment of mercy. But for mercy cannot be ritualized unless the body is itself a body that is grounded in freedom. So furthermore, freedom is ritualized in shared spaces. By implication, the African body is a social body that instantiates mercy because it is grounded in a turn to freedom. Before an individualistic turn is deduced from this argument I'm making, it is proper that I state the following. Wariboko argues that in the light of the traditional African spirit of communality, freedom is something enjoyed in public, not in private. Free people participate in public actions for the common good with one's peers. Freedom is the power to act together, to initiate new possibilities in the community, to think and act in new ways. It is about appearing to others as a distinct, irreplaceable individual in the public space, the shared world, and performing immortal deeds. The instantiation of mercy through ethical acts is grounded in a vision of the divine in African worldview. As Laurentine Magessa rightly notes, and I quote him, "As God is and does, so human beings must be and do. The understanding of God remains the standard against which the moral standards of human beings are measured," unquote. Though the deities are spirit beings, they are not denied access to embodiment. Hence, the rituals of spirit possession that is found in African religion. Spirit possession can be a means by which the spirit beings, or even the deities themselves, but never the supreme deity, because it is mostly worshipped through its subsidiaries. So the other deities enact a prophetic warning of the community to right wrongs that have had the effect of derailing cosmic order. By performing their role in the world as spiritual beings, deities and ancestors act in freedom that is oriented towards cosmic harmony, and one which must necessarily be enacted within the social world. In other words, spirits, deities, and ancestors never act individualistically. They must act with a sense of social commitment because the ordering of the world enacts their own harmony and existence. A disordered world is itself a threat to their existence, just as they have a responsibility over humans and other beings in the material world to ensure that they act morally with a focus on enacting the common good. Humans have a responsibility to watch over the deities they worship, to ensure that they do the right thing. Their acts of unnecessary violence is a threat to the very existence of humans themselves, and that cannot be allowed if humans are to call the material world their home. What implications does this embodiment, whether of spirits or of humans, have for the church in Africa? This is my question, what I'm trying to probe. So to address this question, I will draw briefly on the theology of the incarnation and its implication for a type of ecclesiological consciousness for the African church. A key point can be said to define the vision of the human person in Christian theology. The human person, as a being crafted in the new humanity of the risen Christ, is a being saturated with freedom. But who then is truly free? This is a pertinent question in Christian exploration of a sense of self. And this is a question that Hans Kuhn posited as well. So Hans Kuhn points to the liberative work of God in Jesus. It is the man who is free from sin, the man who lives not by himself and through himself and for himself, but the man who lives in God and so for his fellow man. Sorry, I'm using man. Here I'm quoting him directly. Since the human person is a being crafted in freedom by a free God, then one can conclude that freedom is itself a summon to an ethical awareness. This summon evokes a going beyond oneself, setting one's gaze on the social world. In fact, the human person, as an embodied reality, is a being grounded in sociality. This grounding is what makes possible for the ethical responsibility to arise. The human person, as an embodied being, must realize itself through the ethical turn to that which is other. In this turn, does the human person discover his or her fullness as a being always in relation. This is also the grounding for an ecclesial existence. So John Zizioulas notes this well when he writes, personhood implies the openness of being, and even more than that, the ecstasis of being. That is, a movement towards communion which leads to a transcendence of the boundaries of the self, and thus to freedom, unquote. For Christians, this sense of openness is not some abstract idea that begins and ends in the domain of abstractions. Rather, it is grounded in the domain of the ecclesial belonging. The sacraments are media of belonging and a summon to be a transformative agents in many concentric circles of life for Christians. In fact, I am even making the case that all the entire sacraments in Christian tradition are sacraments grounded in mercy. So the ecclesial sense of belonging situates the Christian as an embodiment of life that must be experienced by others in all the concentric circles of belonging that have their source in the risen Christ, who stands as the prototype of the new humanity that exudes life for all in the church and beyond. In other words, the source of life in Christ is what serves as the guide and the grounding of life for the Christian. As guide, it leads the Christian all the way to the ends of the earth to be a bearer of hope and life for all. But a point must be stated categorically here. This light is not an insular one. The light of Christ bears with it the fullness of ecclesiality, a point well stated by Karl Rahner when he writes that it is the very nature of the church to be a church that transforms all spheres of social life, including that of the church itself. This is possible because of the freedom of the Spirit to renew all things so that God's life can be fully experienced. Consequently, wherever a Christian finds herself, she instantiates the church because her new humanity in Christ is a social humanity. Her body is an ecclesial body, a body that instantiates a we consciousness, and not simply an I consciousness. And because their body in baptism becomes an ecclesial embodiment, those they encounter and interact with are themselves existential catechumens. The fact that the Christian body is a body of openness to others evokes a turn to freedom as grounded in an ethic of life. By this, I mean that the body is always a body of freedom that exudes a summon to embrace life, which others ought to experience as well. In their experience, they awaken to themselves as free beings. Theologically, God is freedom itself. God cannot but create beings that exude this essence of freedom. But this freedom, as Karl Rahner concludes, cannot be viewed in a Christian sense as an in itself neutral capacity to do this or that in an arbitrary order and in a temporal series which would be broken off from outside, even though from the point of view of freedom, it could go on ad infinitum. Freedom is the capacity to make oneself once and for all, the capacity which of its nature is directed towards the freely willed finality of the subject as such. The proper nature of freedom, however, appears precisely insofar as freedom is the basis of absolute salvation and damnation of Christian revelation. And this finality and before God, finally and before God, unquote. Sorry, I was quoting him. Because the gift of being an embodied being is grounded in God, that is freedom itself, then the proper way to express such freedom is to ground it in God. This is where the ecclesial turn becomes relevant, as well as the body as an incarnation of an ecclesial existence, being the church of Christ in the social world. Now, I'm asking myself, what are the markers of a church of mercy in Africa? And that's where I want to posit maybe some insights on that. It is worth remembering the fact that mercy is a pathway of the retrieval of memories of life. This point is not lost in Christian liturgy. To remember the event of the Paschal mystery is to reconnect the community to the liberating memory of the salvific event. Consequently, the Christian becomes aware in a complete manner of all that Jesus experienced to bring about their salvation. It is this aspect of mercy as a praxis in memory that John Sobrino points to when he writes, and I quote him, "And mercy restores the ultimate to the victim, life. It also restores dignity. The first is evident, but it is important to emphasize the second." When Jesus acts with mercy, persons in need not only receive help, but also recover their dignity, unquote. Right. Okay, thank you. So the sacramental life of the church as rituals of mercy are themselves pathways to the retrieval of the salvific memory of God's active role in cosmic history. The same can be said of African religions. The practice of mercy is a pathway to retrieving Africa's cultural wisdom that is grounded in a deliberate turn to the highlights of the moral guide for the people. To heal the sick, to forgive the guilty ones, to show empathy to those in need, to educate the ignorant, to venerate the ancestors, and even to worship the deities in African cultural world. These are themselves expressions of mercy that are mediated through a retrieval of the cultural wisdom of the people. With this above in mind, the insights of Nicholas Berdyaev ought to be taken seriously when he writes, and I quote him, "In societal life, the spiritual primacy belongs to culture. It is not in politics and not in economics, but in culture that the ends of a society are realized. The nobility of every true culture is defined by this, that the culture is a cult of ancestors, the veneration of cemeteries and memorials, the connection of sons with fathers. Culture is based upon a sacred tradition, and the more ancient the culture, then the more remarkable and beautiful it is. A culture is always proud of the antiquity of its origin, of its inseparable connection with a great past," unquote. If the African church is to be fundamentally a church that is authentically African, it ought to be shaped fully by the African cultural world. This means that an instantiation of the praxis of mercy within the church itself must always be also that, and also an instantiation of the retrieval of the rich memories of Africa. Just as the church must embody a prophetic awakening that helps to prune African cultures to allow them to become sources of the mediation of life for the people, so must the African church be open to the liberative engagement by African cultures in guiding the church to ways it can become a church of mercy for the people of the continent and beyond. So let me just read my conclusion because I'm cognizant of the time. In conclusion, just as the deities and those in the material world are in need of mercy, and by their being faithful to each other, through their moral needs express reciprocal acts of mercy towards each other, the same can be said in Christianity. The Trinity is a communion of mercy, where love, hospitality, blessings, and intimacy are fully and freely given to each other. Similarly, the church, as a vehicle of mercy, is also constituted as a body saturated with the virtue of mercy. The church is not just a deliverer of mercy. It is always in need of mercy. And only through this way can it be a vehicle of care, understanding, love, and unity for others. Since mercy is praxis in the retrieval of memory, the church in Africa cannot avoid its cultural roots. For it to be fully relevant to its people, it ought to be constantly open to being enlightened by the deposits of wisdom and insights embedded in African cultural world. It is only through this way that the African church can be a church that heals Africans of their social illnesses from the ground up. Thank you. Did I keep the time?
Yes.
Oh.
You did well.
Thank you.
For the sake of our friends who are following the conference online, you are requested to introduce yourself as you ask a question so that they get to know who is asking a question. Solidarity. So, okay.
Thank you so much. What a rich presentation. And I'm convinced, you've convinced me to some extent anyway. And this is what I'd wonder, justice and mercy kiss in the words of Scripture. And can you conceive of justice in its many modes, including social justice, as a work of mercy?
Yeah.
Because, the Dives-Lazarus parable is one in which Lazarus receives the mercy of God. Dives does not. So justice sometimes includes something less than mercy. But anyway, what would you think about the work of justice in the framework that you've articulated so well?
Yeah. Thank you. Is this working? Yeah. Yes. Okay. Thank you very much for that question. I would say, from an African point of view, justice must be grounded in a consciousness of abundant life. So when I'm penalizing you, it's not just me being punitive justice. It's that, am I penalizing you in such a manner that the access to abundant life is retained? So even if there might come a time where the acts you have committed are so grievous that if we bring you back, it will diminish that abundant life. Then we have to cut you off like a cancerous cell from the body so that we can heal. But that consciousness of orientation towards abundant life is what grounds justice always in the domain of mercy. Yeah.
No, they want to follow who is asking questions. Yeah.
Okay, for the sake of those online, my name is Cyril Oji, University of Dayton. Thank you, Professor Egbelu, for your presentation. I just have two side comments, which are just silly side comments, and then I'll make my substantial point. The first one is like, Akimayowa raised the question, why is it that when it comes to Africa, the idea of African religion seems to be not put on the same standard as Christianity? And I think you answered that because when we talk about, we know who the God is from the wood it is carved. Mm-hmm. That's almost like, the scripture says, we never say our God to the work of our hands, mm-hmm. right? So I think that seems to like minimize African religion. So the second one is when you were using the word he for God, you apologized. But then when you were using she, you didn't apologize. So shouldn't it go both ways?
No, I'm not going to apologize for that one, okay. For she.
Okay, then my substantial point actually is this, like, the idea of mercy. This whole discussion between the reformers against the Catholics, justification by faith, it's all about mercy. The grace works insofar as it confers mercy. Yeah. So that tradition is already there. It's just about you pulling out the motif of the soteriology in Luther and also in the Catholic Reformation. But the idea of mercy is contained in the idea of grace.
Yeah, thank you very much for bringing that up. It ties to what you said earlier on. You asked a question to Cyril and said, I would like to know is it African religion, how old is it, and all that stuff. I want to tie it to what you just said. The retrieval becomes difficult in the psyche, the social psyche of the African church because of the pathology of coloniality of imagination. It is the nature, this is something I have been very passionate about. It is the nature of colonialism to produce colonialities. We usually talk about the three colonialities, but there's a fourth coloniality. Coloniality of power, coloniality of being, coloniality of knowledge. There's also the fourth one, coloniality of imagination, which prevents the colonized from going deeper into their historical heritage. So what colonialism does is to create a false foundation, which does not allow you to go deeper. So you have to figure out how to circumvent that false foundation to go deep. So that said, why am I even talking about these issues? It's because for us in Africa, what type of Christianity was given to us? It was a Christianity of subserviency. at least the time it came during the time of the colonial era, which prevents us sometimes, unless we do the needed work, to go deeper into our historical heritage of the tradition. So I'm glad you are pulling that tradition also. So I am also saying that maybe African religions can help disrupt our imagination and force us to ask new questions that can take us to a richer engagement with the Christian tradition in the context of Africa. Sorry, I wanted to address that, your question, Thomas, to him. That has not been addressed.
My name is Emmanuel Ojefam from Notre Dame. I am concerned about your framing of the human-deity relationship in the context of mercy. When a God no longer satisfies the moral, spiritual, social, psychological yearnings of the people, they can change their God. They can discard the God. Now, how does that square up with this idea of mercy when the discarding of the God can lead to what Pope Francis calls a logic of exclusion, a throwaway culture? Because if you can discard the God, you can discard human beings as well. And we can see this at work in traditional African societies when some people are considered to be excluded people, useless people. And so I'm just looking at how you move from that relationship of the deity that can be excluded and changed to the way we can treat human beings and even the environment as something that is just out for a culture that can be just simply thrown away.
I like your question a lot. I think it still goes back to that reality. We cannot be naive, because I have been accused of that in the past in this approach. We cannot be naive that everyone lives on the domain of absolute sanctity and perfection. There is sin. Sin is real in the world. Augustine got that right. And so there are certain actions. That's why we have praxis of excommunication. But again, I love the question again, not just for the following reason, that it's not just to say, oh, you are disturbing the peace, we excommunicate you. There must be a pneumatological probing, a discomfort within the community to ask new questions. Is this person asking or behaving in a manner that has entered a different horizon that the community has not yet entered? And so we might do what I call the hermeneutics of the empty chair approach. That this person might be taking us to a new place where we don't have the language yet. Let us be careful. So there's a type of punishment we can give to this person without complete erasure. I will agree with that. But there's also a way you can excommunicate the person and say, okay, calm your nerves down, and then we bring you back to the community. So without a complete radical cutoff. Yeah. I really love your question. I was also asking myself, like, how can we kill the Christian God? But I had to hold myself because the Dominicans are here, I'm afraid, of Inquisition. But jokes apart, quickly, finally, I wanted to say, maybe this is a naive engagement to that question. There is also the tradition in Christianity, in the Catholicism, where some saints we no longer pray to them, we just move on to other saints. Yeah, go ahead.
Just a final question here. Towards the end of your presentation, you spoke about church from below. Yeah. And the language that you're presented with is so technical. So church from below is the church of ordinary people. How do we bring this language, make this language simple for ordinary people?
I agree. Oh, my goodness. You have accused me of what I accuse my students of. Because I tell them, come on, say it in a third graders level so that we can understand. It's a work in progress on my part as well. So I'm open to that critique. I think it goes to the relational, because relationship has its own language. It's not high-end theological lingo. So it's the relational. The church below is a language of relationality, of encounters. So I agree with you. Thank you for that.
Thank you so much, Simon, for your merciful and moving presentation. Maybe offer him a round of applause.